Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own family? Like you could disappear and no one would even notice? I have. And for years, I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need them to see me, to love me, to choose me. But the truth? It mattered. More than I ever wanted to admit. I was the kid they forgot about. The background character in a story where my younger brother was the star. He got the love, the praise, the life that should have been shared. And I got, well, nothing. Just a last name that tied me to them like an afterthought. So I left. I built a life of my own, far away from the people who never cared. And for a while, I thought I was free. Until one day my father called, not to ask how I was, not to apologize, but to demand that I come home. This is my story. And if you think family means love, think again. Stay tuned, because this one's real. And if you connect with stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Reddit True Vault. Some truths deserve to be heard. My name is Jonas, and if you're reading this, I guess you're curious about what it feels like to grow up invisible. Not in the literal sense, of course. I was there, I existed, but to my parents, I might as well have been a shadow. A silent figure in the background while the spotlight always shone on my younger brother, Roman. I don't remember exactly when I realized I was just an afterthought in my own family. Maybe it was the time I got sick and had to remind my parents 3 times before they took me to the doctor. Or maybe it was every birthday party Roman got, filled with decorations, gifts, and laughter, while mine was just a cake on the dinner table, if they even remembered. The truth is, I was never the priority. My parents weren't bad people in the way most would define it. They weren't outright cruel. They provided food, a roof over my head, and an education. But when it came to love, affection, and attention, that all belonged to Roman. It wasn't that he was smarter or more talented than me. No, it was simpler than that. Roman was a beautiful baby, one of those chubby, smiling infants that made people stop in the streets just to admire him. Relatives fawned over him. Strangers complimented my parents on how lucky they were to have such a handsome little boy. And as absurd as it sounds, that was enough. That was all it took for them to decide he was the golden child, and I was just there. I wish I could say I didn't care. That as a child, I was blissfully unaware. But the thing about being ignored is that you feel it, even before you can name it. You learn to recognize the weight of absence, the lack of a hug when you come home from school, the way your achievements barely earn a nod while your sibling's smallest accomplishment is met with applause. I remember one Christmas when I was 7. Roman got a brand new bike, a mountain of presents wrapped in bright, shiny paper. And me? I got socks. Just socks. I laughed it off at the time, told myself it didn't matter. But that night, when everyone was asleep, I cried into my pillow, wondering why I wasn't enough. This was my childhood. A slow, quiet realization that in my parents' world, I was nothing more than a supporting character in the grand story of Roman. And the worst part? I convinced myself it was normal. I don't think my parents ever forgot Roman's birthday. It was impossible. The house would be filled with decorations, laughter, and the smell of cake days before the actual date. Guests arrived in waves, arms full of gifts. Mom would spend weeks planning the perfect party, theme, invitations, food. Everything had to be just right. And then there was my birthday. If I was lucky, I'd get a happy birthday at breakfast. No cake, no candles. Just a passing acknowledgement, like someone commenting on the weather. One year, when I turned 10, I actually reminded my parents the night before, hoping maybe, just maybe, they had something planned. Mom blinked at me, like she was trying to remember what I was talking about, then muttered, "Oh, right. We'll do something this weekend." We never did. I tried not to care. But it was hard when Roman's birthday rolled around just a few weeks later, and suddenly the entire world revolved around him again. It wasn't just birthdays, though. It was everything. When I was in 3rd grade, I came home with a report card full of straight A's. I was proud, really proud. I had worked so hard, staying up late to study, double-checking every assignment. When I showed it to Mom, my heart was pounding. Maybe this time, she'd see me. Maybe this time, she'd say she was proud. She barely glanced at the paper. "That's nice, honey," she said, setting it aside without a second look. "Roman, show me your drawing again." I stood there, watching as my little brother held up a crumpled sheet of paper with what looked like a half-melted dog. Mom gasped like he had just painted the Sistine Chapel. "Oh my God, sweetie. This is amazing. We have to put this on the fridge." And she did. My report card? It got lost in a pile of junk mail. But the moment I knew, without a doubt, that I was nothing more than a shadow in my own home was the day I broke my arm. I was 12. I had been climbing the big oak tree in our backyard, something I had done a million times before. But that day, I misjudged a step, and the next thing I knew, I was hitting the ground hard. The pain was instant, sharp, and unbearable. My arm bent in a way it definitely shouldn't have. I screamed for my mom. She walked outside, took one look at me curled up on the ground, clutching my arm, and sighed. "Oh, Jonas, you're fine. Roman fell off his bike last week, and he didn't cry half as much. That was it. No panic, no concern. Just a comparison to Roman, as if his tolerance for pain somehow made mine invalid." That was the day I stopped trying. Because what was the point of fighting for love that was never meant for me? I stopped expecting anything from my parents after that day. If I wanted something, I had to get it myself. If I needed help, I had to figure it out alone. By the time I was 14, I had already learned how to cook basic meals, how to fix things around the house, and how to navigate life without bothering anyone. No one noticed. No one cared. Roman, on the other hand, was treated like a prince. If he so much as sniffled, Mom would drop everything to fuss over him. If he got bored, Dad would take him out for ice cream. If he wanted something, he got it. No questions asked. Meanwhile, I was expected to just exist, and that would have been fine. I could deal with being invisible. But what I couldn't deal with was Roman actively making my life miserable. He loved tormenting me. It started small, hiding my homework, accidentally spilling juice on my bed. Then it escalated. He'd take my things and lie about it, knowing my parents would never believe me over him. He'd shove me into walls, trip me in the hallway, call me names whenever no one else was around. And every time I tried to fight back, I was the one who got in trouble. Don't be so sensitive, Jonas. It's just brotherly teasing. You're older. You should know better. Stop overreacting. Roman didn't mean it. It was always the same excuses. Always the same dismissal. So I stopped telling them. I bottled it all up. I poured everything into my studies, determined that one day I'd get out of this place. And when I finally got the chance, when I received an acceptance letter from one of the most prestigious colleges in the country, I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would be proud of me. I was wrong. When I showed them the letter, Dad barely looked at it before saying, "That's nice, but you'll be going to the local college." I froze. "What?" Mom nodded like it was already decided. "It's closer to home, and we don't want Roman to feel bad that you're going somewhere he can't." I stared at them, waiting for them to laugh, to tell me they were joking. But they weren't. They were serious. I had worked my ass off for this. I had spent years pushing myself, sacrificing my social life, my sleep, everything, and they wanted me to throw it all away because Roman might feel bad. That was the moment it all became clear. I wasn't their son. I was a problem they had to manage. An inconvenience they had to keep in check. Roman was their pride, their real child. I was just there. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them. I was going to outsmart them. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. When my father told me I had to go to the local college, I simply nodded and said, "Okay." And that was the moment I realized something. They didn't care where I went. They didn't care what I wanted. As long as I stayed within reach, within their control, that was all that mattered. So, I let them believe they had one. I told them I would enroll in the local college. I told them I wouldn't go far. I told them everything they wanted to hear. And in return, I made a simple request. If I had to stay, at least let me live in the dorms. They agreed immediately. They probably thought I just wanted some space, or that I wanted to experience college life without actually leaving home. It was convenient for them too. Less responsibility, fewer questions. They wouldn't have to think about me if I wasn't around. But what they didn't know, what they never even bothered to check, was that I had already secured a full-ride scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. And the moment I got the chance, I packed my bags and left. I didn't tell them where I was going. I didn't tell them anything. I just disappeared. And the craziest part? They never even noticed. Not once in the 3 years that followed did they check up on me. No visits. No unexpected calls. No "how's school?" or "do you need anything?" Nothing. It was as if I had never existed in the first place. At first, I thought maybe they would realize. Maybe they would wonder why I never came home for the holidays, why I never called, why I was never there. But they didn't, because the truth was, they had never really seen me in the first place. And so, for the first time in my life, I was free. I wasn't Jonas, the forgotten son. I was just Jonas. And for once, that was enough. Leaving wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing how easy it was. I thought I'd feel guilt. I thought there would be some hesitation, some voice in my head telling me to turn back, to call, to explain. But there was nothing, just silence. No one called to ask where I was. No one demanded to know why I wasn't coming home. I half expected my mother to at least send a text, some half-hearted, "Are you okay?" But even that never came. And so, my life began. For the first time, I was living for myself. No obligations, no expectations, no weight of disappointing people who never really cared. At first, it was overwhelming. I had spent my entire childhood trying to prove my worth, trying to be seen, only to realize that the moment I stopped trying, no one noticed. It hurt. I wish I could say I didn't care, that I was just relieved to be free, but that would be a lie. There were nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if they even realized I was gone. If they had a moment of panic, if they checked my room, if they even remembered I existed. But time passed, and those thoughts faded, because life moved forward. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My scholarship covered nearly everything, and whatever was left, I handled on my own. I took part-time jobs, learned to budget, learned to rely on myself. It was terrifying and exhausting, but at the same time, liberating. For the first time, every success was mine. Not something I had to downplay so Roman wouldn't feel bad. Not something that would be brushed aside because my achievements weren't as important as whatever my brother was doing. Mine. And I made the most of it. I graduated early, top of my class. Landed a six-figure job right out of college. Moved into my own apartment, fully furnished with money I had earned, not stolen from some fake parental support system. And still, nothing from them. No calls. No messages. It was funny, really, how they spent years making me feel like I was nothing, only to prove at the moment I was gone. They had their golden child. That was all they needed. And so, I let them live their lives, and I lived mine. Years passed. I built myself from the ground up, piece by piece, success by success. I created a life for myself that they never would have given me, never would have believed I was capable of. I thought I had left it all behind. I thought I had finally escaped. But then, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. And the moment I did, I heard the voice I had spent years trying to forget. "Jonas, it's your father." I had spent 5 years without hearing their voices. 5 years without a single "How are you?" or "Are you doing okay?" 5 years of silence, except for one thing. My father's bank transfers for college tuition, which I never asked for, but took as a silent, backhanded way of repaying me for the childhood they stole. Then, out of nowhere, my phone lit up. "Dad." I stared at the name for a long moment, my fingers tightening around the phone. A part of me, some stupid, desperate, broken part, thought maybe, just maybe, they had finally realized what they had done. Maybe they finally wanted to talk to me, to ask me about my life, to tell me I mattered. I answered, "Jonas, you need to come home. Roman's wedding is in 2 weeks." No greeting. No "How have you been?" Just a command. I swallowed down the lump in my throat. "I'm not coming." There was a silence. Then his voice turned sharp. "What do you mean you're not coming? He's your brother. This is important." I almost laughed. Now family was important. Now they remembered I existed. I said I'm not coming. And that's when it came, the real reason for the call. "If you don't come, I'll stop paying for your college fees." There it was. The only thing they ever cared about when it came to me. Control. It was never about family. Never about me. It was about keeping up appearances. And they had no idea. I let out a slow breath. My heart wasn't even racing anymore. Just cold. Numb. "Go ahead," I said. "Stop paying." A pause. Then, his voice dropped lower, like he thought he could still intimidate me. "Don't test me, Jonas. You don't want to ruin your future over this." I smiled bitterly, shaking my head. They had no clue. No clue that I had graduated a year ago. No clue that I was making more money than he ever did. No clue that the son they ignored had built a life so far beyond their grasp that he didn't need them anymore. For a long time, I had imagined this moment. I thought I'd feel triumphant, powerful, vindicated. But all I felt was empty. "You don't have to worry about my future anymore," I said finally. I took care of it myself. And then I hung up. I stood there for a long time, staring at my phone, gripping it so hard my hands shook. But the shaking wasn't from fear. It wasn't from anger. It was grief. Not for them. For me. For the little boy who had spent years waiting. Waiting for them to love him. Waiting for them to notice him. Waiting for them to say, just once, "We're proud of you." But that boy was gone. I let out a slow breath, blinked through the burning in my eyes, and did the only thing left to do. I opened Reddit, and I started typing. I thought that would be the end of it, but I should have known better. The very next day, my phone rang again. This time, it was Mom. I stared at the screen. For a second, just a second, something in my chest twisted. This was the first time she had called me in years. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then I picked up. "Jonas, sweetheart, how are you?" My stomach turned. "Sweetheart." I couldn't remember the last time she had called me that. I'm busy, I said flatly. Busy? But you didn't even hear what I had to say. I already knew what she had to say. Dad told me about the wedding. My answer hasn't changed. There was a pause. A beat too long. Then, her voice dropped into something lower, more desperate. Jonas, listen, you don't understand. Your father and I, we just want the whole family together. You know how people talk. It would look bad if you weren't there. There it was. It was never about me. It was never about wanting their son back. It was about appearances. About saving face. I felt something inside me crack. Tell me something, I said, my voice steady. If I never picked up the phone, would you have called me again? Another pause. This one too long, and I had my answer. My mother sighed. Jonas, don't be difficult. Difficult. That was what I was to them. Not a son. Not a person. Just an inconvenience that needed to be handled. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter. I could hear my father's voice in the background. Angry. Put him on speaker, he snapped. A moment later, his voice filled my ears. Jonas, enough of this nonsense. We've given you everything. Now it's time to give back. Come home for the wedding. Be a part of this family. A laugh, sharp, bitter, escaped my lips before I could stop it. Be a part of this family? I repeated. When was I ever a part of this family? Silence. Then, the final blow. You are our son, Jonas. That means you have responsibilities. Responsibilities. But never love. Never care. I closed my eyes. They didn't miss me. They didn't want me. They just wanted to use me. And I was done. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay even. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. I am your son. But that doesn't mean I owe you anything. And then I hung up. The moment I hung up, my chest felt hollow, not lighter, not freer, just empty. I stared at the screen, half expecting it to ring again. Some irrational, broken part of me still thought they'd try one more time. That maybe, just maybe, there was still something left to salvage. But the phone stayed silent. I guess that was it. No more calls. No more words. Just silence. A silence that should have felt like freedom. But all it felt like was proof. Proof that I had never really mattered to them. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. My hands felt cold, my fingers numb. For years, I had imagined this moment. I had imagined telling them everything. How I had left. How I had built my life without them. How I was more successful than they ever thought possible. I had imagined the shock in my father's voice. The silence from my mother. I had imagined their regret. But now, sitting here, staring at my phone, I felt nothing. Nothing but the weight of a realization that pressed against my ribs like a vice. Even if I told them the truth, they wouldn't care. They wouldn't be proud. They wouldn't apologize. They wouldn't suddenly see me as their son. They would just be angry. Angry that they had lost control. Angry that I had slipped away without their permission. Angry that I had become something they never expected. Something greater. And that's when I knew. I didn't owe them anything. Not an explanation. Not my presence. Not even my anger. I had spent years carrying this weight, waiting for the moment they would finally see me. But the truth was, they had already made their choice. And now, it was time for me to make mine. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. A part of me wanted to send them a final message. A part of me wanted to end this properly. Maybe something polite. Maybe something cruel. Maybe something that would finally make them understand. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew that the greatest answer I could give them was silence. I turned off my phone. The screen went black. Their voices, their demands, their existence, gone. And for the first time in my life, I was weightless. It had been almost 2 months. 2 months of silence. 2 months without a single call, a single message, a single forced attempt at pretending we were a family. I had started to believe that was it. That maybe, for once, they had finally let me go. Then my phone rang. Roman. I stared at the screen. I could ignore it. I should ignore it. But some old habit made me answer. I didn't say anything. Just waited. His voice was quiet at first. Almost hesitant. Jonas. I didn't respond. A shaky breath. Then, they know. I frowned. Know what? About you. About everything, Roman said. You're not in school. You have a job, a good one. I didn't say anything. They found out a few weeks ago, he continued. Started asking around. Calling the school. Looking up your name. Dad figured out where you work. I sat there, absorbing his words. They what? They've been trying to figure out how to contact you, Roman said. At first, they thought you were still in school, still relying on their money. But once they found out the truth, he trailed off. I waited. Then, quietly, that's when they realized they don't have control over you anymore. I let out a slow breath. Not because I had expected this, but because I hadn't. Because I had assumed they would never bother. Because deep down, I had believed that if I disappeared, they would simply move on, just like they always did. Roman cleared his throat. Jonas, things are bad. The wedding's off. She took the money and ran. Dad's business is collapsing. They lost the house. They're barely staying afloat. A pause. They need you. Funny, they never needed me before. They're different now, Roman said quickly, like he could sense the door closing. Jonas, please, just talk to them. If you just hear them out, maybe. Did they ever ask about me? Roman went quiet. Before they knew I had money. Before they realized I was useful. Did they ever ask about me? More silence. Did they ever wonder if I was okay? If I was happy? Then, barely above a whisper. No, there it was. The answer I already knew. But hearing it made it real. I had spent years waiting for them to care. They never did. I exhaled. A life without me. I said, calm, steady. You all chose that a long time ago. Don't come looking for me now. And then, before he could say another word, I hung up. No more waiting no more hoping no more pretending. I turned off my phone, for the last time, and yet, I still felt that weight in my chest. Not sadness, not regret, just the dull, empty ache of finally accepting the truth. I sat there for a long time, staring at the glow of the city outside my window. The same city where I had built my life. The same city where I had proved to myself that I was more than what they had made me believe. And yet, for all the years I had lived here, for all the success I had earned, tonight, I felt like that same kid again. That same kid standing in the doorway, waiting for them to look up. They never did, and they never would. I reached for my laptop. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. Just something, anything, to put this feeling into words. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. And then, without thinking, I opened Reddit. I clicked on the familiar subreddit. The place where strangers told their stories, where people I had never met listened better than my own family ever had. And then, finally, I started typing. Jonas didn't need to prove anything. He didn't need to get revenge through success. He just stayed silent. And that was the greatest punishment of all. Because sometimes, the cold indifference of someone who no longer cares hurts more than any words ever could. What do you think? Should Jonas have told them the truth? Or was his silence the best answer? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Reddit True Vault for more emotional and thought-provoking stories.